There you go. Just just a bunch of drunks. There you go. My name is Jerry, and I am an alcoholic. And from a power I found by working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, remaining reasonably responsible and attempting to carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers. I haven't found it necessary to drink since June 7th, 2002, and for that, I am eternally grateful. I have a sponsor who knows he's my sponsor, and he is a sponsor, and I sponsor just about as many people as I can. Keeps me out of me. And I want to thank you for inviting me. This is a huge group. It's great to see an online group that people have some time. People meet on a Tuesday night. It's awesome to see. I don't do well by myself either. So I'm glad I'm here. And so thank you for inviting me. If you ever come to Atlanta, yeah, we're one of two or three primary purpose groups, but we're in Smyrna, Sandy Springs. We're in that area, and we'd love to have you come out. We meet on Mondays. We do a book study, and then if you want to attend virtually, you can. You can do that from wherever you are. And we meet on Friday nights for a speaker meeting, and that's virtual, and you can. It's hybrid. You can do both. So in June of 2002, I entered a treatment facility, and I'd finally come to an end, and I thought I was going there for drug addiction because I thought maybe I might be a drug addict. At least that's what people told me. And the small caseworker said, "You need to stop drinking." And I thought that was just a preposterous, suggestion to me. How could she even suggest such a thing? And she said, "Well, in her experience, it was very unlikely that I would not do those things and drink at the same time. One would lead to the other, and that I was most likely alcoholic. And I knew I was not alcoholic. I just knew that for sure. I was 46 years old, and darn it, I know what. And you'd ask me, what is an alcoholic? I'm like, I'm not really sure. But if you come to Atlanta, there's a series of bridges, and we call it Spaghetti Junction. And if you were to ask me what an alcoholic is, I would say it's one of those people that lives under there. He doesn't have a home. He doesn't have most of his teeth. He wears a raincoat in the summer, and it's hot, and drinks cheap wine out of a bag. And that's what I thought an alcoholic was. But really, I didn't know much of anything for sure. I had opinion, but didn't know much. I had no job. I had a strange marriage, and I blew through $250,000 of our own retirement. And I did that without asking. I just took it. But most importantly, I had no belief in or relationship with God, none. And I had lots of questions, but I didn't have any answers. And the first was, could I even be alcoholic at all? So I went back to my life and said, let's take a look. And I was born in upstate New York, in Syracuse, New York, and my last name begins with S, and it's got a vowel on the end, so I'm definitely Italian, right? And I was born of an athletic Italian American family, and there was my brothers with and sisters with olive oil skin, dark hair, and when I did have hair, I looked like Alfred E. Newman because I had bright red hair, freckles, and I wasn't good at sports at all. I was good at contact sports, but my brothers were phenomenal at baseball and basketball, and the coaches were so happy to get me until they got me, and then they weren't happy at all, right? And we moved from Syracuse to Long Island to Rochester, and strangely enough, none of my five brothers and sisters turned out to be alcoholic. It was just me. I didn't know that wasn't, I thought that had everything to do with it, and I just didn't know. And I knew this though, I did feel apart from everybody else because, if I look at my mom and dad, I look at the people around me, I look at my own family, I didn't fit in. I looked like Alfred E. Newman or Bozo the Clown, one of the two, that kind of combination. Until when we lived in Long Island, it was 1968, and my mother said there's two types of eggnog here. They had some bridge people coming over, and I was 12, and they said, "Well, this is the children's eggnog, and this is the adult's eggnog, and don't confuse the two." And said something about eating a hole in my stomach, and that was the difference. And that sounded like a novel idea. That sounded pretty good to me. But nonetheless, if I'm excluded to have something, I definitely want to. I don't want to be told no. And the adult eggnog had something like bourbon, brandy, rum in it. And the other one didn't have any of that. So as soon as her back was turned, I drank it. And I'm like maybe 80 pounds. And I chugged down it. And the first thing was like, this is awful. Why would anybody do this to eggnog? It's my first taste of beverage alcohol at all. And I got dizzy, and I'm like, 12 years old and 80 pounds and fell to the ground. And then here's the crazy thing. As much as I fell to the ground and the eggnog put me there, the only thing I could think about was climbing the leg of that table up to where I can get more eggnog of exactly the same thing that put me down there. It seemed like when I drank it, I got thirstier. I didn't know that then, but that makes sense to me now, right? It I knew when I look back on it, I never drank for taste. I don't even understand that concept. How people could say, I like the way this tastes and I'm going to stop when it starts to affect me. That doesn't even compute with me. I don't get that. I would never want to drink like a normal person. If that's what normal is, oh God, no. And through life, though, I tried to put things that would fill me up, that would help me feel like other people look. I tried motorcycles, stereos, money, living in the fast lane. Anything that would fill that void in me to help me feel complete. And seemingly everything was improved by my drinking, like Boy Scouts. Definitely much better if you're drinking screwdrivers, right? Camping trips, a team night at school. We would sit around and drink god awful stuff. Mayonnaise jar, don't get caught from mom and dad. So you take a little scotch and you mix it with a little vermouth and you mix it with some cream de menthe and you mix it with a beer and you mix it with some gin and you just have this awful concoction and you just shake it up and just drink it. And you don't drink it because it tastes good. You drink it because what it did to me. And what it did to me is it let me breathe. I'm like, finally, this is the way I'm supposed to feel. And I didn't have any consequences. I didn't get sick that night or those nights. I don't think I even got caught. My parents never even knew there was anything going on. I never had any consequences at all. Up in Rochester at this point, we moved up there. Um, my current sponsor said he was born disappointed. I'm like, yep, I understand that one completely, right? And in 1982, I met a woman. Now, I had moved down here in Atlanta since 1978. And so 4 years later, we got married. And I thought, this is the thing, different than the motorcycles, different than the stereos, different than the money, living in the fast lane. This is the thing that made me whole. And it worked for a bit. But for the next 20 years of my marriage, I drank, I lied, and I stole from her household. That was it. She would bring money home, and it would be cash, and I would steal it or help her look for it. And it was like on the 4-step, it was incredible. She was all over it, and like I'm trying to help her look for money. I know where the money is. It's gone. I used it. I stole it, right? And I'm still making her feel bad by thinking that she misplaced it. Carl Jung, a Swedish psychiatrist, said in a letter to answering Bill, he said, the craving for alcohol was similar to the craving for wholeness, the union of God. Now, not having a relationship with God, I had no clue what he was talking about. It didn't even make sense. This craving had no idea. I may have had that craving for union for God, but I never would have believed it. So I kept looking and seeking, discarding what didn't work. If it didn't fill the void, I moved on. The book would suggest that the main problem with the alcoholic centers in the mind rather than his body. And you're not kidding. I've done some crazy things. Like before I got sober, I was worked in the restaurant business, and I've worked in the restaurant business most of my life, 47 years. I I got fired for a job, strangely enough, drinking related. And I couldn't be honest with my wife about it. So I went to work. I dressed up and pretended to go to work, and I didn't have a job for 2 weeks. I couldn't tell her, but I pretended to go to that job. I remember one of the bartenders said, I think you're an alcoholic. And I thought, how rude of him to say that in front of the whole staff. How rude. And so I fired him. He was being divisive. And like it's my position that I didn't get enough satisfaction out of firing him once. So I begged him to return to our employ only so I could fire him again. I wanted to fire him twice, right? And that made sense to me. I mean, I didn't get enough satisfaction from it. All right. I My wife married a non-smoker, but the reality is, and she dropped me off at that rehab. She said, "Is there anything else you need to tell me? Anything?" I don't think she really means that. I think she wants really means this is it, isn't it? But I said, no, I've actually been smoking. And she said, well, do you smoke when you drink? I said, well, I do smoke when I drink. She said, well, how long have you been smoking? I said, 13 years. She said, 13 years? I said, yes. She goes, what, a cigarette or two? I said, 4 packs a day for 13 years. Yikes. Now, it never dawned on me that I would quit. That never ever entered my mind as a possibility. What entered my mind is, well, if she finds out I'm a smoker, it's going to hurt her. I don't want to hurt my wife. So do the things you need to do so she doesn't find out. Quitting was not one of them. And then gradually things started getting worse, right? My behavior started to go down, deteriorate. I started missing work here and there. I had brushes with the law. I had a DUI. I had a car crash. I had a rolled truck. I've had the kind of things that people on this call kind of get. I mean, it's just you drink long enough and hard enough. It's never a good scenario. and But the crazy thing is, the mental part is, never did I think any of these things had anything to do with how much drinking I did. It was mostly I was unlucky, right? It didn't make any sense. And even crazier than that, the next time just before I drank, I really couldn't remember the consequences or the things that had happened while I was drinking because I was drinking. They go, this time I'll handle myself differently. And the book suggests that. So when I finally got into the book, I'm like, oh, I just loved it. How they wrote a book about me back in 39 and how I needed it and could relate to it in 2002. And my wife would leave me little notes on my pillow and say, do you think you have a problem with alcohol? I'm like, I can't believe she thinks I have a problem with alcohol. No, of course I don't, right? And meanwhile, this book of Alcoholics Anonymous is moving around our house, right? And it's on the piano with my piano music. I play a little piano. They're like, who's going to read this and who's this for? And then it would be in the kitchen with my cookbooks, right? And I don't know there's two of these books that I'm not going to read. There's only two of us. We don't have any kids. Not for her. And then it would be on my bedside stand with my book on Burgundy, with book on bourbon or beer. There's another book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Didn't make sense to me. Only when I find out later that she's being directed by the guy who would become my sponsor, who waited for 2 years for me to get ready. Each day I would make a decision to not drink. By 4 or 5 o'clock, I would break that decision. And then it usually ended up with me making it almost home. I didn't want to get caught, so I would open the door on my street, even though I live in the country, and take a leak, finish what I'm drinking, because I always had a scotch with me, smoke a cigarette, put everything in the freezer bag while the car's running on my street at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I can't believe I didn't get arrested. It doesn't even make sense. I had no ability to stop and stay stopped. I always started again. 20 years of making promises, 20 years of being unable to keep them, and 20 years of being unable to remember the day before. Like I made that promise. I did the same thing yesterday. It was kind of like Groundhog Day for me. Every day was almost the insane. It never dawned on me, no matter how hard I tried, that there's some things I just couldn't do, right? And then at some point, I've worked my way down in the restaurant business, and the manager came and said, your wife's on the phone, which is never good. She said, I've just been to the bank. There's another $5,000 missing. And she said, you wouldn't do this. What made you do this? And the only thing I could think of, I had to think quick. I said, geez, I don't know. I think I was bored, which I would not recommend to anybody to tell their spouse. Don't tell them you're bored. Tell them you don't know. Tell them you make something up, but don't use that. That's not good. And she said, well, if you need to die, if you're going to die, you need to go somewhere else. And I did the only thing I could do. I checked into a cheap hotel, rolling all the pennies and loose change I had, and it went there. And the craziest thing was I had a liter of scotch with me, cheap scotch. I forget what kind it was, but it was not good. But I drank the whole thing, and it doesn't happen with everybody. But that night, it stopped working. I don't know whether I got drunk or not, but I couldn't put out the noise, the voices in my own head. I drank for a fact. That was to get rid of me, and I couldn't do that. Right. So I ended up going to this rehab, and they told me, these people were nice there. They said, when you get out, get into AA, get a sponsor, which I did. Right. And, at my very first meeting, which is strangely enough where my home group meets now, I remember someone said, do you want to read? And I said, I think that would be lovely. Until it said, yes, we want you to read how it works. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. This talks about making the decision to turn your will and your life over to God as you understand it. I can't read this. I think they want me to read this out loud. I know nothing about AA. All I know about AA is when I worked in the restaurant business, they came in, they smoked a lot of cigarettes, drank a lot of coffee, and consumed an incredible amount of sweets. That's it. That's all I knew. I only picked up one white chip, but someone said, you only picked up one. I mean, is that special? Like, not really. If I would have gone to the meetings when I needed to go to the meetings, I would have picked up thousands of them. I just stayed out there. That's the key. If you don't want to pick up one white chip, just stay out as long as possible. Don't ever come in. And I met my sponsor, who actually was actually a godsend. He says this. He says, Jerry, my real purpose is to fit myself to be as maximum service to God and the people about us. I said, are you serious? I got a dork as a sponsor. I just wanted to quit drinking. I just wanted everybody to just leave me alone and quit drinking. And then very quickly, we're in the book. Matter of fact, that's all he did. We just got in the book. So much so that when I would go to his house, to me that was AA. I'd go to clubhouse meetings and I'd call him afterwards. I go, I think I'm at an AA meeting, but it doesn't sound like AA. It sounds awful. It's what you and I do in the book makes sense. This, I don't know if this guy's talking about his weed eater. She's talking about her cigarette holder. Something's going on there that I have no idea. When we got to the doctor's opinion that said men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol, I was in the book. Everything the book said made sense to me from that point going forward. If it didn't, I knew it wasn't the book. I knew it was me. And it says further on, clear-cut directions are set out. And eventually I learned that the moving around, okay, maybe uncomfortable, maybe thirsty, the not looking like the rest of my family, the not fitting in some level and ever because I have bad vision and I don't really play well with ball sports. Those things may have made me thirsty, but they did not make me alcoholic. Two things and two things only make me alcoholic. When I honestly wanted to, I found I couldn't quit entirely, or when drinking, I had little control of the amount I took. That is big. It's wide. It means I never got DTs. I never got the shakes. Well, okay, I'm sure I would have, right? Looking back, I was a real alcoholic from age 12. And we went to my sponsor's house and we did the third, four, and the four steps. And I didn't have that white light experience, that burning bush at all. I was, though, however, convinced of this. I wasn't sure what was out behind door number 2. I didn't know if God really existed, but I know one thing for sure. It was not me. I knew I could not do this job myself. That I was thoroughly convinced of. And when we started to do the 4-step, my wife was on all 4 parts. It was very obvious that I harmed her. Thinking about myself and what I needed to get inside me, I harmed those people around me. It's the first time ever I got to see my faults, my wrongs, my mistakes. I'm like, huh. And crazy thing is, I said, I was wrong again. I was wrong often, right? And around step 9, I intermittently started to sense this thing that I had not believed in, that I didn't think existed, right? It started like maybe, just maybe there's something else out there. I mean, I was at church. I was at where God supposedly resides, but I wasn't in it, and I didn't get it. It didn't make so. It didn't. I didn't have that kind of connection. I was grateful and still grateful, knowing me, that I met a member that was recovered in Alcoholics Anonymous, because there's so many people that good-naturedly sponsor other people that I'm not so sure know the literature like we do, and he did, right? So, but I still had no connection except with my first sponsor and Joe and Charlie and the big book. And, I switched sponsors, and like I had a, I switched it from him because he said, "You're done with the steps. So get out there and sponsor someone." And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I never did want to do that. I'm not sure I do know how to do that. And we're going to be in rough shape here. I mean, I pity this poor person I'm going to work with. I go to a meeting and I look at this guy, and he looks a little different, and he looks a lot like my brother who's schizophrenic out in Los Angeles. And I bet he's on psychotropic drugs, alcoholic and schizophrenic, and found that out to be the case. So I learned something about schizophrenia. Kevin needed a sponsor, and he was schizophrenic. So to me, it seemed like the skies had opened up, divine intervention had happened, right? And we worked together for a long time, maybe 3 months, 2 3 months, and he was doing great. And his mother pulls me aside and said, "Hey, just want to let you know that we appreciate your help, and Kevin isn't even an alcoholic." I said, "Yeah, I know. I lied to my wife about lots of things. She didn't believe that at all, right?" And she goes, "No, you don't understand. Kevin's dad doesn't drink. I don't drink. There's no alcohol in the house. Kevin doesn't leave the house unless we drive him. He comes to meetings only because you guys let him talk." So here I got a freebie. I got someone to practice on that couldn't possibly be alcoholic. Shortly after that, I got back in the restaurant business. My sponsor, who was in the restaurant business, said, "You need to get back in the restaurant business." And in 2005, I was hired as the wine manager. Crazy enough, I said, "Are you serious? Of all the jobs I'm applying for as manager, you want me to evaluate wine?" And yes. Now, I don't tell them I'm an AA, but I looked crazily through the training manual. Like, does it say I have to drink something? It said, "No, you have to lead wine dinners." Okay, I can do that. You have to be in control of liquor, beer, and wine. Yeah, I can do that. You have to order an inventory and educate. Like, I can do all that. And in 2007, I became a certified sommelier with the Quartermaster Sommeliers Society of Wine Experts, and a sommelier with a level 2 sommelier with the Wine Spirits Education Trust out of England. And here's the amazing thing. It's not even that hard. You study, anybody can do that. Anybody, I think, that does the steps can do that and not drink. But here's the crazy thing. Here is me working right next to the very thing that brought me to my knees. And I couldn't go 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days without drinking. None of that. And never even thought about drinking. It would just be awful, as long as I stay relatively spiritually fit, right? Um, Karen, how much time do I have? Is that 10, 15, 10?
15, yeah.
Okay, good, 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 good. I wasn't sure. I don't want to come up too short, but I don't want to go too long either. All right. And in 2007, I went down with a couple sponsees to Cocoa Beach, Florida. And then we followed it up. I told, I think, Doug in the call that I did it in reverse. And I saw some people that were in the book, Joe and Charlie. And I met a guy I went to high school with. who's been sober 10 or 15 years longer than me, had never heard of Joe and Charlie, had never listened to them. I listened to them for 3 years straight. I'd get in the car, put in a Joe and Charlie CD. And when that was done, I put in the next one. And that's how that big book. And then I went out to Dallas, Texas, and went with Cliff Bishop, who started the original Primary Purpose Group, and hung out with him and Myers. And we did 12-step calls in a jail. And I'm like, it was great. I realized that their group was taking 50 meetings a week out. I'm like, now it's much, much bigger than my home group, Primary Purpose Group, but it was big and they were active. And one of the things I've learned, Ann Smith wrote or made sure it was in the book, faith without works is dead. Right. So unless I do something, being all spiritual and being enlightened, all that self-knowledge avails me nothing. I get to move my feet. 2019, my wife retired to from her job, right? And she works part-time and said, because she's working days now and I'm still working kind of nights, she's kind of lonely and says, I'm lonely. And she remembers it different. She said she told me that for 2 or 3 years before, and I just wasn't listening. That's entirely possible. I was very wrong on my fourth step, right? But I realized that this restaurant that I owned, I just sold it back to the people I bought it from, right? And um, I had the opportunity presented itself to be the husband that when we got married, I was supposed to be, that she wanted, I never was. I sold my interest back to them, and I'm now working a plumbing company. I work 8 to 5. I'm still work full time. I don't work weekends, and I get to get her coffee and breakfast. I get to make her lunch and dinner. I get to be there for her. Those things that I used work as an excuse that I didn't do. I don't believe AAs exist for the sole purpose of getting me sober. That didn't come to me at once. That didn't come to me initially. Steps still suggest that we tried to carry the message to the alcoholics. So I believe this, that the big book suggests that we work the steps, and the first 11 are for me, only to prepare me and qualify me to work with another alcoholic. It talks about it in the chapter, working with others. For me, I believe that that's the thing that keeps me sane, working with other alcoholics. If I don't have them, I'll revert back to the person that was in it for me. And I really don't like that person. I had it when I was about 3 years sober. I had 3 or 4 people working on their 4-step, so I'm not really staying too much in contact. Another 3 or 4 people that are already on step 12. They're already working with people, and I got nobody. And my truck I drive doesn't look quite as good as it used to. And the house I'm living in, I could do better. I could maybe make more money. And I realized I need to find somebody and find somebody fast. The big book suggests that Bill and Bob set out to work almost frantically on AA number 3. And sponsorship is the bright spot of my life. I start my day at 6:30, and my phone goes off at 7 and starts ringing till 9. And the first person I work with is usually at 10 o'clock. So there was a certain point where I did the steps, and I can't expect those that I sponsor to understand the traditions and concepts because I didn't do them myself. I couldn't transmit something I didn't have. So I had to immerse myself in general service. I had to go to as many tradition studies, as many concept studies, and it's a lot of stuff. But I'm learning, I'm changing, and those around me are growing like weeds, and they don't have to go 16, 17 years without knowledge of the traditions. I had good knowledge of the book, but that was it. I can't expect them to do things that I didn't do. In 2020, I briefly was GSR. I briefly, maybe for about a year, was the Alt DCM. I started looking at the service manual, and the service manual suggests that 2 years is GSR. I'm like, you know what? This doesn't make sense. If my role as DCM is to help other GSRs communicate, help them, show them the ropes, gather them up, enlighten them, how am I going to understand how a GSR works if I've never been one? So I resigned, or I didn't stand for DCM, and I became alt GSR of my home group, and I love it. It's awesome, right? It's a way to help my home group as best I can, right? So in this case, my fulfillment commitment is GSR 2 years, and then after that, if I stand in this coming September, and if elected, I'll be the GSR. I will fulfill that commitment for 2 years, and then stand for DCM in my area, right? It just took a long time and a strange way to go about it to finally get through the steps and the traditions. And it's not like I sponsor people today. My own path, I get people that are through the steps and go, let's go into the traditions. And we meet on Wednesday nights and we have the best time. I can't show them the other two sides of the triangle if I don't know myself. And we all get together, some people from Memphis, person from Boston, person from Minnesota, from Alabama, from Louisiana. And we all get together online and we hoot and we holler. Yes, we study and we're enlightened. We love all that kind of stuff, but we do it together and they're growing. I was on a call recently that a former delegate spoke at, and I'd swear I thought, you know, our little group of people that are doing this thing, I think we can hang with the rest of them. This is great, as opposed to being in AA, knowing how to not drink. And that's said, the cessation of drinking is but a beginning. It's not the ending. Our more important demonstration is our occupation, our homes, and our affairs. I need to be doing this stuff. I've had 5 sponsors. My current sponsor is from outside Syracuse, New York. He lives over in Riverside, California, and he is so sarcastic. It's hysterical. I love this guy. And he said, I think sponsorship is about friendship. And he had me right there. Because if you can't be friendly with someone you're going to take through the steps, I don't know, maybe something hasn't happened in your life. To me, you don't tell them, take the cotton out of your ears and put them in your mouth. That doesn't, we shouldn't be hostile to the people, I think, that that we sponsor. So I understand that of myself 100% because of those 20 years of trying to quit and 20 years of being unable. I cannot drink one day at a time of myself. It took 20 years to understand that. But it doesn't mean I do nothing. It just means, but I can attempt to fit myself to be of maximum service to God and the people about us, and attempt to maintain my spiritual condition one day at a time. That I can do if I'm willing. That I can do and trust God and rely on Him, right? I understand that what I have is something that's chronic. It means it's never, ever, never, ever, never, schmever going to go away. Never, right? I have something that's chronic, not acute. Both of them will kill me. If it's something that's acute, it goes, I get it fixed. I'll never see it again. I had osteoarthritis in my hip. The doctor said, you won't have arthritis ever again. And I said, at the hip replacement, I said, well, yeah, unless I get it. He goes, trust me, you can't get it. You may get other stuff. You can never get osteoarthritis. But alcoholism is something different. There's no destination for it. I've never experienced anything that's chronic like it. No matter what I do, it gives me that daily reprieve, right? That's it. I understand that I have the daily reprieve and that it's contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition, not my spiritual condition. If you read it, it says contingent on the maintenance. That means there's things I need to do daily if I really want that daily reprieve. If I'm not convinced of that, I'll do what I want to. And I wish I could say that I haven't through the years. Oh, I have. I've been slack. I've been like everybody else. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I've been like the people I know, that you do things when you're in pain. You do things because you say you're supposed to. And then you get back to some type of discipline. And I've been much better about it maybe the last year, probably because if the sponsees are doing what they're supposed to do, I got to do what I'm supposed to do. They push me. I have to be an example for them. I understand that one alcoholic can affect another as no non-alcoholic could, and that strenuous work one alcoholic was with another was vital to permanent recovery. That was something I was really concerned with, is how do I perfect and enlarge my spiritual life if I don't believe in God? This is anything is up, I get that. But I convinced I was alcoholic. I was convinced that there's a solution, but I was also convinced that that solution would be out of bounds for me. I would never be able out of reach. I would never be able to get there until it said that I just need to work one drunk with another. And strangely enough, my connection with God, higher power, God as you understand Him, is much different today than it was when I got here. I'm also convinced that unity of our fellowship is the most important thing we have. I can't expect to break a tradition and not have others break them as they see fit either. I understand the service structure. When Bill Wilson came out with the traditions, he came out with the concept, came out with our general service, came up with the upside down triangle. He really was much of a visionary that I can barely understand how he did that. How one human brain said, I think this is a good idea. We trust this person to be our GSR. He's gonna vote for, he's gonna see things and bring that information back to us. And we're gonna tell him what we think about that, and he's gonna bring it to the district, maybe to area assembly, hopefully. And I'm just about wrapping up. At the end of the meetings, we read, we should be worthy of the fellowship of the Spirit will surely meet some of you as you trudge the road of happy destiny. And we do that often in Vision for You. And I understand the road, the path, the journey we're on is the happy destiny they're talking about. I read it for wrong for years. I said, as we trudge the road to happy destiny. There's no to in there. It's of happy destiny. It's like happy destiny road, right? You get on it and you go. I didn't drink the same as other people. I'm not going to recover the same as other people, but hopefully we're on the same path, going the same direction. A friend of mine from Los Angeles, California says, welcome to AA, where you'll be divinely inconvenienced for the rest of your life. And I thought, that's true. And it doesn't sound particularly good at first, but that turned out to be the best thing ever. And I wanted to thank you, Karen, for having me here. Thank you for everybody that showed up and inviting me to trudge the road with you.